Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 prepares to depart from Kuala Lumpur International Airport en route to Beijing.
Is the biggest aviation mystery of all time the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370?
Later this month, an American company is again going to search for the wreckage of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. And you'll surely remember, the Boeing 777 bound from Malaysia to Beijing, and it was suddenly going south into the far southern Indian Ocean.
What if I told you that after 11 agonizing years, the ocean finally spoke? That the biggest mystery in modern aviation history might finally be cracking open. For over a decade, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 has haunted us. 239 souls vanished into thin air on March 8, 2014. Families were shattered. Experts were bewildered.
What did it look like?
Like a wing. It was the wing off a bloody aircraft.
The world could only speculate about those final terrifying moments. But here's what changes everything. An underwater drone, exploring one of the most isolated and treacherous parts of our planet's ocean, has just uncovered evidence that's sending shockwaves through the entire investigation. What it found? It's not just another false lead. This time, the clues are undeniable. This time, researchers are stunned. This time, we might finally understand what really happened to MH370. Are you ready to dive into the depths of this mystery? Because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about that fateful night. Stay with me, because this story is about to get intense. The discovery. Picture this. Early 2025. The Seahorse Zone. Ever heard of it? Most people haven't. It's a stretch of ocean so remote, so impossibly deep, that it feels like another planet. This is where many experts believed MH370's final answer had been hiding all these years, buried under crushing darkness and unimaginable pressure. Ocean Infinity's flagship vessel, the Armada 7806, positioned itself over these waters. Beneath it, more than 6,000 meters of absolute void, waters so deep they could swallow mountains, pressure so intense it could crush steel like paper. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Into this crushing silence, engineers released a fleet of advanced autonomous underwater vehicles. Think of them as robotic explorers, designed to go where no human could ever survive. Each drone descended steadily, its instruments awakening one by one as it entered a world humanity has barely glimpsed. For hours, the sonar feeds showed nothing, just soft, grainy sediment. The kind of emptiness that makes you question everything. Then something changed. One AUV caught a reflection. Something that didn't belong. Something that made every analyst in the control room freeze. Can you imagine that moment? The tension, the disbelief. The sonar image sharpened. A long, flat shape emerged from the data, nearly 30 meters in length, half buried in the seafloor, smooth, metallic. And here's the kicker. It matched almost perfectly with the dimensions of a commercial aircraft wing. The team ran a second sweep. They had to be sure. How many times had they chased shadows? How many rocks had looked like engines? How many formations had mimicked debris?
For missing flight MH370, authorities appear closer to resolving the mystery of the final resting place of the Malaysian 777 aircraft.
But this was different. The match with the WSPR-derived path was perfect. Excitement rippled through the control room, but everyone held their breath. Hope can be dangerous when you've been disappointed so many times before. They deployed another drone, this one equipped with even higher resolution imaging. It flew directly over the target, and what it revealed made hearts race. Ribbed internal structures, torn metal edges frozen in time, twisted panels bearing the unmistakable signatures of catastrophic impact. And then, it got even more compelling. Within a 15-kilometer radius, the drones spotted two more anomalies, one resembling a fuselage segment, another that looked like a tail assembly. The findings were classified immediately. Verification protocols activated. Because if these pieces were real, If they were actually from MH370, it would mean something earth-shattering. The first identifiable wreckage had been lying in a place no previous mission had ever reached. But wait. Before we dive deeper into this breakthrough, you need to understand what came before. What initial discoveries brought hope? What fragments first whispered the truth? Keep watching, because the story of how we got here is just as gripping. The first whispers. Let me take you back to July 2015. 16 months of agonizing silence. 16 months of families waking up every day with the same crushing question, where is my loved one? Then, on a quiet morning, something extraordinary happened. A man walking along the eastern shore of Réunion Island noticed something strange tangled in seaweed. It was curved, nearly 2 meters long, covered in barnacles. Its edges were torn, softened by months drifting through salt water. At first, locals thought it was fishing equipment, just another piece of ocean debris. But then aviation experts arrived. Within hours, the world heard a sentence many had stopped believing they'd ever hear. The debris is a flaperon from a Boeing 777. And only one aircraft of that type was missing. After 16 months of unbearable silence, the ocean finally whispered its first truth. Can you imagine the emotions that flooded through families in that moment? The grief reopening, yet sharpened with new clarity? The terrible confirmation that their worst fears were real? The discovery shook the investigation awake. Engineers examined every detail of that flaperon. How the hinges had snapped, how the metal showed fatigue marks from violent, high-speed impact with water. Nothing suggested a mid-air explosion. Instead, the damage pattern pointed toward a controlled but catastrophic descent. That single fragment shifted everything from theory to physical evidence. Soon, more pieces began appearing on distant shores. A section of the horizontal stabilizer in Mozambique, part of the cabin interior in Madagascar, an engine cowling fragment in Tanzania. Each item bore its own pattern of tiers.
This is the engine cowling. It has two purposes. One is to provide the proper cooling and protection for the engine.
Bends and salt damage. Each one was a message from the deep. Together, they formed a fragile, breadcrumb trail scattered across half an ocean. Scientists from multiple countries worked to trace these drifting clues backward, using powerful computer models. They ran thousands of simulations, adjusting for wind speed, sea temperatures, even the Coriolis effect. And you know what? Again and again, the paths pointed to the same place, a narrow corridor of deep ocean southwest of Australia, near an area already known as the Seventh Arc. Picture this landscape. Underwater mountains and trenches plunging more than 5,000 meters into darkness. A place where sunlight has never reached, where the pressure would kill you instantly. For investigators, this was simultaneously a breakthrough and a torment. The fragments proved the aircraft had met its fate, but they didn't reveal where the main wreckage rested. It was like finding ashes without knowing where the fire had burned. But here's what I want to know. How do you search a place like that? How do you explore an environment so hostile that humans can't even approach it? The answer: you send machines. Machines that would revolutionize deep-sea exploration forever. Machines against the abyss. For 3 brutal years, the Indian Ocean defeated every human effort. Ships crossed millions of square kilometers, dragging sonar equipment through violent seas, battling storms that could flip vessels. They returned each time with nothing but static and shadows. But in 2018, everything transformed. The search entered a new era, not led by human endurance, but by machines built to conquer the unconquerable. Enter Ocean Infinity, a private company from Texas that believed it could succeed where entire nations had failed. They arrived with something unprecedented, a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, sleek, torpedo-shaped robots capable of slipping into the abyss with silent precision. Here's what made them revolutionary. Unlike older systems that had to be slowly towed behind ships, these AUVs roamed freely. They were guided by sophisticated onboard computers. Each one carried multi-beam sonar, high-resolution imaging tools, and three-dimensional mapping systems that could paint pictures of landscapes no human had ever seen. And get this, they could dive nearly 6,000 meters down. That's almost 4 miles into a world where sunlight is only a memory. At the heart of the operation sat the Seabed Constructor, a ship that functioned like a floating space station for deep-sea exploration. From its open deck, engineers released AUVs one after another into the freezing waters of the southern Indian Ocean. Ocean Infinity's deal with Malaysia was as bold as their technology. No find, no fee. They would only be paid if they discovered the wreckage. Can you imagine that kind of pressure? That kind of gamble? Each dive began with engineers programming coordinates into a drone's navigation system. The moment it submerged, the robot vanished into the dark, sweeping the seabed in perfect grids. Every ping of sonar painted a digital picture of the ocean floor, trenches, cliffs, plains, landscapes no human had ever witnessed. Data streamed back to the Seabed Constructor 24 hours a day. Analysts worked through the nights, studying shapes and shadows that might finally reveal MH370's location. For weeks, the crew battled savage seas and unpredictable weather. The Indian Ocean is one of Earth's harshest environments, towering underwater ridges, unpredictable storms that could derail the mission in minutes. Yet despite everything, Ocean Infinity's robotic fleet managed to search an astonishing 112,000 square kilometers. That's nearly matching all previous government searches combined. What they uncovered was haunting. Miles of silt-covered plains broken by deep fissures where sonar simply vanished into voids. Occasionally, sensors picked up metallic shapes, igniting hope, only for them to be revealed as rock formations or geological anomalies. Hope rose and fell like waves. But the work continued. Now, even though the 2018 mission ended without a breakthrough, it marked a critical turning point. For the first time, humanity had mapped parts of the deep ocean in detail that once seemed impossible. And Ocean Infinity didn't stop. They kept improving. Their AUVs grew smarter with every mission, using artificial intelligence to refine search patterns. By 2024, a technological leap had materialized. The Armada 7806, a vessel capable of coordinating multiple AUVs remotely. It didn't need human pilots guiding each dive. Instead, using satellite links and machine learning, it operated like a digital hive mind, directing its robotic fleet with perfect synchronization. This wasn't just exploration, this was evolution. The upgraded AUVs carried powerful tools, sub-bottom profilers that could scan beneath the seafloor, and side-scan sonar sharp enough to distinguish aircraft debris from coral. These systems didn't just see the ocean, they read it. With this advanced fleet ready, scientists refined new models predicting the most likely crash zone. Their calculations pointed toward a deeper, rougher region than ever before. A section of seafloor near a trench ominously known as the Seahorse Zone. A place previous missions hadn't reached. A place where the ocean kept its darkest secrets.
White seahorse is one of only 2 endangered seahorse species of 50 or so on Earth.
But before we reveal what happened in the Seahorse Zone, we need to understand what happened that night. What really happened to Flight 370. The night everything changed. March 8th, 2014. The clock reads 12:42 a.m. Flight MH370 lifts off from runway 32R in Kuala Lumpur. It's a routine red-eye flight to Beijing, one Malaysia Airlines had operated countless times. On board, 2 experienced pilots, 10 cabin crew members, and 227 passengers from 14 countries. Families, business people, students, each with their own story, their own destination, their own future ahead of them. Nothing about the departure suggested this night would become aviation's greatest mystery. The Boeing 777 climbs smoothly through Malaysia's night sky. Air traffic controllers clear it to ascend. Communications are normal, standard, routine. At 1:07 a.m., the aircraft's automated ACAR's message reports a healthy fuel load, 43,800 kilograms remaining. Everything appears perfectly normal. Then comes 1:19 a.m. The final spoken words from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Those would be the last confirmed words ever heard from Flight 370. The crew never checks in with Ho Chi Minh City as planned. When Vietnamese controllers try contacting the aircraft, there's no reply. Another pilot flying nearby attempts to relay a message. All he hears? Static, faint mumbling. Something is terribly wrong. At 1:20:31, as MH370 crosses waypoint Igari, its transponder stops transmitting. 5 seconds later, it disappears from civilian radar entirely. Within 60 seconds, the aircraft is invisible to controllers in both Malaysia and Vietnam. But here's the chilling part. It wasn't gone. Not yet. Malaysia's military radar, operating independently, catches something extraordinary. The plane turns sharply to the right, then sweeps into a long left arc that sends it back across the Malaysian peninsula. It flies over the Strait of Malacca, passes south of Penang, and tracks northwest along established air routes. Think about that. This wasn't random. This was deliberate navigation. By 2:22 a.m., the aircraft reaches the edge of Malaysian radar coverage and vanishes for good. From that point on, only satellite data would hint at where it might have gone. But here's what haunts investigators. Why did the transponder stop? Why did communications go silent? And why did the plane turn back? Across Southeast Asia, confusion spreads like wildfire. Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam all detected pieces of MH370's early flight path, but political sensitivities and reluctance to reveal military capabilities slowed information sharing. In less than an hour, MH370 had slipped through some of the most heavily monitored airspace in Asia, leaving behind only fragments of data and an ocean of questions. The world didn't know it yet, but this quiet sequence of events would trigger one of the largest and most expensive searches in history. A search spanning continents, oceans, and ultimately, more than a decade. But even as the plane vanished from radar, something else was happening. Something that would later prove crucial to understanding its final hours. The ghost signals. As investigators pieced together the timeline, one detail stood out. One detail that made the disappearance even more unsettling. After the final ACAR's transmission at 1:06 a.m., the aircraft's satellite communication system went dark. Whether it was a power interruption or something more deliberate, no one could say for certain. But here's where it gets spine-chilling. At 2:25 a.m., nearly an hour and a half later, something unexpected happened. Above the Andaman Sea, the satellite link suddenly rebooted. It sent a log-on request, the first electronic sign of life since everything went quiet. Inmarsat, the satellite company monitoring the channel, detected the signal immediately. The aircraft was still out there, still flying in the darkness. But no one knew where, and no one in the cockpit responded to calls. For the next 6 hours, MH370 continued to handshake with the satellite, answering hourly status pings like a ghost plane drifting across the sky. Can you imagine? A massive Boeing 777 carrying 239 people, flying silently through the night while the world below scrambled to find it?
More than a decade after its disappearance, Malaysian authorities have announced that the deep-sea search for Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 will resume. Here's what to know. The Boeing 777 flight disappeared without a trace on March 8, 2014.
2 ground-to-aircraft calls at 2:39 a.m. and 7:13 a.m. rang unanswered in the cockpit. The last confirmed exchange at 8:10 a.m. was routine, just another automatic status check. But then came one final, chilling moment. At 8:19 a.m., the aircraft sent a fresh log-on request. as if rebooting again. The ground station acknowledged it. And then, absolute silence. When Inmarsat attempted another ping at 9:15 a.m., MH370 never responded. Those signals led investigators to one devastating conclusion. The plane had likely flown until its fuel ran dry somewhere deep in the southern Indian Ocean. But the story on the ground was far messier. Confusion swept through air traffic control centers from Kuala Lumpur to Ho Chi Minh City. Radar reports conflicted. Operators traded calls insisting the aircraft was in Cambodian airspace, even though Cambodian controllers had no contact with it. Malaysia Airlines Operations Center, relying on outdated data projections, kept reassuring everyone that MH370 was fine. By the time Kuala Lumpur activated its rescue center at 5:30 a.m., more than 4 hours had passed since the plane vanished from primary radar. Malaysia Airlines didn't issue a public statement until 7:24 a.m., claiming they'd lost contact at 2:40. Ironically, while MH370 was still flying over the Indian Ocean, search crews were deployed in the wrong sea. They scanned the South China Sea while the aircraft continued its silent journey far to the west and south. When Malaysia's Prime Minister finally addressed the world on March 24th, he delivered the news families had dreaded. According to the data, MH370's last known position was in the southern Indian Ocean, a place with no landing sites, no radio towers, no survivors. Families in Beijing were gathered and told the aircraft was lost. Some received the message via text. Months later, officials formally declared the incident an accident, presuming all 239 passengers and crew dead. Yet sightings flooded the media.
Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
239 people were on the flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. More than 150 passengers were from China.
Fishermen reporting low-flying jets. Oil rig workers describing burning objects. Island residents claiming they saw a massive aircraft roaring overhead. None were ever confirmed. But here's what gnaws at everyone. If the plane flew for 6 hours after losing contact, who or what was controlling it? And what happened in that cockpit? The human element of this mystery is perhaps the most disturbing part of all. The human question. As search teams mapped the crash zone and analysts interpreted satellite data, investigators turned their attention to the people aboard flight MH370, especially those with access to the controls. Malaysian police began with the cockpit. They searched the homes of both pilots, reviewing personal histories, financial activity, digital devices, and hours of CCTV footage. According to the preliminary report released in March 2015, nothing stood out. No unusual transactions, no sudden withdrawals, no behavior suggesting stress or planning. On camera, the pilots moved calmly and naturally. No signs of emotional volatility. But despite these official findings, a growing number of investigators, particularly in the United States, argued that human intervention remained the most likely explanation. Think about it. At some point early in the flight, someone deliberately reprogrammed the autopilot. Someone redirected that Boeing 777 away from its planned route and out into the vast, empty Indian Ocean. And if it wasn't a hijacker hidden among the passengers, then suspicion inevitably circles back to the cockpit. Media reports claimed Malaysian police had privately identified Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah as the prime suspect, should human interference be proven. This view was echoed years later by former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. In a 2020 documentary, Abbott revealed something shocking. Senior Malaysian officials had believed almost from the start that the aircraft's disappearance was a murder-suicide carried out by the captain. Malaysian authorities denied withholding anything, but the revelation reopened a debate many hoped had been settled. In 2016, that debate intensified. A confidential document surfaced showing the FBI had discovered a simulated flight path on Zahari's home flight simulator. one that eerily matched the aircraft's theorized route into the Indian Ocean. The ATSB confirmed the discovery. The Malaysian government later acknowledged it as well. But while officials insisted it was nothing sinister, retired engineers and pilots began presenting detailed analyses, arguing strongly that the pilot's suicide theory best matched the technical evidence. Here's what investigators could confirm. The SATCOM system functioned normally until it acknowledged its last ACARs. Message at 1:07 a.m. Shortly afterward, power to the satellite data unit was interrupted. The final report concluded that the loss of communication before the diversion was likely caused either by systems being manually turned off or by deliberate power interruption. Malaysia's Prime Minister stated outright that the radar transponder and data transmission systems were deliberately disabled. Deliberately. Let that sink in. Investigators examined every passenger too. One flight engineer initially drew attention due to his technical skills, but he was quickly cleared. The discovery that 2 Iranian passengers had boarded using stolen passports sparked global alarm, but Interpol later confirmed they were asylum seekers, not terrorists. China, which had the largest number of citizens aboard, vetted every passenger and publicly ruled out sabotage or terrorism from its nationals. Attention then turned to the cargo. MH370 was carrying more than 10,000 kilograms of goods, including lithium-ion batteries weighing over 2,400 kilograms. Lithium batteries are known hazards, capable of triggering intense fires if they overheat. But investigators found nothing to suggest improper packaging or mishandling. Meanwhile, aviation experts debated what happened during the final hours. An in-flight upset, a hypoxia scenario, a glide event. All were examined. The ATSB's conclusion? An unresponsive crew or hypoxia event best matched the evidence, explaining how the plane continued on a steady course for 5 hours with no communication, likely operating on autopilot until fuel starvation. The recovered flaperon revealed that landing flaps were not extended, contradicting theories of a controlled ditching. This supported the idea that MH370 entered a high-speed spiral dive after the engines flamed out and autopilot disengaged. Yet even with these findings, no single theory commands universal agreement. Each explanation answers one question while raising another. And now, with possible wreckage emerging from the depths near the Seahorse Zone, the debate around human involvement is gathering momentum once again. Because if the plane went down in one final uncontrolled plunge, investigators must still determine what or who set it on that doomed path to begin with. But beyond the technical details and investigative reports, there's another dimension to this story. How did MH370 capture the world's imagination? Why has this mystery gripped us for 11 years?
Almost 11 years after Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370's disappearance remains one of aviation's greatest mysteries.
A mystery that captured the world. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has become more than an aviation mystery. It's become a cultural phenomenon that has captivated the world and inspired countless documentaries, books, podcasts, and shows. Within weeks of the tragedy, filmmakers and journalists began exploring the story, seeking to make sense of the incomprehensible. On
April 6, 2014, the Smithsonian Channel aired Malaysia 370, the plane that vanished. Just 10 days later, the Discovery Channel broadcast Flight 370, the missing links. BBC Two joined with its Horizon episode, examining not just the disappearance, but technologies that might prevent such incidents in the future. Flight recorder streaming, ADS-B tracking, satellite monitoring. But it wasn't just documentaries. MH370 has permeated popular culture in ways that reveal our collective fascination with the unknown. In 2023, a comedian faced investigation by Malaysian authorities after joking about MH370 during a stand-up performance. The incident highlighted how deeply personal this mystery remains for millions of people. Why does MH370 haunt us so completely? Perhaps it's because in an age where we can track a pizza delivery in real time, we lost a massive aircraft carrying 239 people. Perhaps it's because in our hyper-connected world, something this significant could simply vanish. Or perhaps it's because we recognize that those passengers could have been us, our families, our loved ones. MH370 has left an indelible mark on global consciousness, not just as a story of loss, but as a puzzle that challenges our understanding of technology, human nature, and the limits of our control over the world around us. It's a cautionary tale, a mystery that refuses to be solved, and a reminder that despite all our advances, the ocean still holds secrets we've barely begun to comprehend. But here's what matters most. After 11 long years, that might be about to change. The search resumes. After more than a decade of uncertainty, Malaysia made a stunning announcement that sent ripples through the aviation community and gave new hope to families who have waited 11 painful years. The search for MH370 would resume on December 30th, 2024. The decision marked the start of a fresh 55-day mission, one that had actually begun months earlier in March, but was forced to pause when violent weather made the waters too dangerous to explore. This new chapter, Malaysian officials said, showed the country's renewed commitment to bringing closure to the loved ones of all 239 people who vanished that night. For many families, it was the first real sign of progress in years. Once again, the mission would be led by Ocean Infinity, operating under their bold, no find, no fee approach. Under the new agreement, they would only be paid if they succeeded, up to $70 million if they finally located the wreckage. It's a high-risk, high-pressure deal, but one Ocean Infinity has accepted before. Earlier searches had already pushed human and technological limits. Nations from around the world joined the original hunt, forming what became the largest search operation in aviation history. 60 ships, 50 aircraft, and 26 countries. But despite years of effort, the operation was called off in 2017, leaving behind more questions than answers. Ocean Infinity returned in 2018 with their first generation of autonomous vehicles. For 3 relentless months, they swept the ocean floor with incredible precision. Yet even that mission ended in silence. Now, with stronger machines, sharper sonar, and new predictions pointing to the unexplored Seahorse Zone, the company is preparing to try again. And that's when they found it. The evidence we discussed at the beginning. The wing-like structure, the fuselage segment, the tail assembly, all within a 15-kilometer radius, all matching the predicted crash zone. The analysis is ongoing. Verification protocols are in place. But for the first time in 11 years, investigators have something tangible, something that could finally answer the question that has haunted the world. What really happened to MH370? So here we are. 11 years after 239 people vanished into the night. 11 years of theories, dead ends, and heartbreak. 11 years of families waking up every morning without answers. But now, in the crushing darkness of the Seahorse Zone, machines built by human ingenuity have found what might finally be the key to this mystery. The underwater drones have done what seemed impossible. They've revealed evidence that's already changing the investigation. They've given us our first real glimpse of MH370's final resting place. But here's what I want to know from you. Do you think this will finally bring closure? After 11 years, do you believe we'll get the full truth about what happened that night? Will the wreckage tell us if it was mechanical failure, human intervention, something we haven't even considered? And perhaps most importantly, will this discovery bring peace to the families who have suffered through 11 years of not knowing? I want you to think about that. Really think about it. Because this isn't just about solving a mystery. It's about 239 people who had lives, families, dreams,
It's about giving their loved ones the one thing they've been denied all these years: answers. The ocean kept its secret for 11 years, but technology, determination, and the refusal to give up might finally force it to speak. The machines have found the evidence. Now we wait to see what story it tells. What do you think happened to MH370? Do you believe the new evidence will finally solve this mystery? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because the truth about MH370 is still unfolding, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The ocean is finally speaking. Are you listening?